our new Cushing Hatherly School Project public meeting.
Oh, okay.
And 6, for those of you that have not been to Hatherly, welcome. My name is Bill Burkett, I'm the superintendent. My 4th year here, and I'm excited tonight to share with you all the updates and new news. For those of you that are following the process, and for those of you who this may be new for us, we'll have some new and updated information. We'll also have plenty of opportunities for questions and answers. This will be videoed as well for those that couldn't make it tonight, and we'll post that up on our website so people have access. And in between meetings, I just want to let folks know that please reach out to me, wburkett@sit.org, call the office. I'll be happy to talk to anyone, answer questions, have coffee, whatever you want to talk about this project. So I don't want people to think they have to wait between meetings. We'll be doing another series of meetings with PTOs, with folks at the Senior Center, and anybody else that wants to meet with us to have smaller groups. And if folks that aren't comfortable asking questions out tonight, we'll stay after a little bit too for those that might want to do individual questions. So I want to make sure that was clear. And I'll reference the website. And finally, this will be on the agenda, but for those of you that aren't familiar with some of the needs of the building, or even if you have kids here and you really haven't had a tour, at the end of the meeting, Principal Sheen and Facilities Assistant Director Chris Hatherly are offering very detailed tours of the building to show you why some of the pictures you'll see here tonight, but the why behind this. Right. Next thing I'm going to do is just going to introduce some of the building committee, so you can put names and faces of folks that are on the committee, and we'll start from first. Don.
Hi everyone, I'm Don Walter, principal with Dorwood Architects, designers on the project. We've had the pleasure of doing the Gates Middle School project a number of years ago, and the Central Public Safety project. What may be most important is that I could be sitting there because I am a 30-plus year resident of Situate, a taxpayer. 2 children who are now adults went through the Central Public Schools, so we're very invested in Situate as a community.
Hi everyone, Tom Englesberg, project manager with Dorwood. Nice to meet you.
We'll do celebrities after.
Heidi Driscoll, Assistant Superintendent. Hi, Nicole Brandolini. I'm the chair of the school committee and the school building committee. I have 2 kids at Cushing and 1 at Gates and 1 at the high school.
I'm Steve Theron with Vertex, the owner's project manager.
John Lemieux from Vertex, also the owner's project manager. And like Don, we had the pleasure of being the OPM for the public safety building, as well as the senior center.
I'm Christine Sheehan. I'm the principal of Hatherly.
Kevin Kelly, Director of Facilities.
Tom Rabb, the Director of Business and Finance for the schools.
Laura Carr, Chair of the Select Board. Nancy Hall, Finance Director, Town Accountant.
Good evening, Jonathan Burwood. I'm one of the community representatives in the school.
Chris Karsha, Community Representative, Capital Plan.
And I'm Jason Boone, an Educational Facility Planner with Dorwood.
Thank you. And then we've had some elected officials here tonight that I wanted to say hi to. And Maria, you want to?
Sure. I'm Maria Fenwick. I'm on the school committee, and I have a 6th grader at Gates who was a Hatherly 3rd grader, and will be kindergartner here next year.
Thank you.
Karen Connolly, Select Board.
Oh, sorry.
Excuse me, Peter Gates. I am on the school committee. I've actually graduated Hatherly Schools. It's nice to be back. I have a 18-year-old who's out of district placement, and I have a freshman in high school.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to start our presentation, and there'll be different parts and sections of this presentation. Again, we'll slow down, but if you have a question while we're going, please just raise your hand or yell it out. We're a small enough group here, I think, that we can do that. So we want to make sure that all those questions are answered tonight and get you as much information as possible. And a lot of this information is new, including the budget that we're excited to release tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Don.
Yep.
Next.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for coming. So as Bill mentioned, this is public forum number 6. So I know some of you have been able to join us and others perhaps not. So there's going to be a lot of information, and Bill mentioned we'll try to go through quickly, but we can always come back and revisit things along the way. So the agenda, we went through introductions. I'm going to do a schedule overview. We're going to identify the project need. Anyone familiar with this building in Cushing probably understand that there is a need in both of those buildings. Going to talk about the site, this site, and how we're going to be proposing to develop it. We're going to look at the building in terms of quickly at the plans, and then look at some of the imagery on how we think the building actually fits quite nicely on this site and within this neighborhood. First time for everyone, there's going to be some interior design images, some snapshots of some of the key rooms within the building. And John has the pleasure of going through the project budget. So we get to take you through the process, let you know what everything's going to look like, and share what the costs are going to be like, and then we'll talk about next steps. And again, as Bill mentioned, we'll all be here for building tours if anyone's interested in seeing the building firsthand. So the project team is important. Obviously, we're working with the Situate Public Schools, the town of Situate, through a school building committee. 20 members of the building committee, which is a cross-section of the community. The school committee members, the school administration members, members of the select board, advisory committee, capital planning, people in general from the community. So there's a nice cross-section of the community that's been helping guide this process with us in making the decisions. Another really important partner is over on my right, your left, the Massachusetts School Building Authority. You're going to be hearing the term MSBA tonight. They are the partner with the town to help fund this project. And John will get into that tonight, give you an idea of how much money they're going to give the community for this particular project. That's the MSBA. You met Vertex with John and Steve. They are the owner's project manager. They work directly with the town and with us, Dorn Whittier and our consultants, in basically guiding this process that we're going through. So in terms of the schedule, big picture first, we've been going through the feasibility study, and that red line you see running through schematic design is where we are today. So we're about 15 months through what is a 16-month process of feasibility and schematic design. And when we get to the end of schematic design, which is the end of this month, we'll be submitting our documents to the MSBA for their review, comment, and ultimate approval, which will happen in April, which we'll get to on the next slide. And then town votes. Assuming all this is favorable at the town meeting and the town ballot, we'll go through a whole design process of about a year to 13 months here, bidding, and then construction, as you see down below here, 18 months, which allows you to occupy the new school in the September of 2027. So we'll be moving right along. And then actually the building will be done in the spring of 27. It will allow us to do demolition, abatement, site work of the existing Hatherly school, move in the fall, and then we'll finish up site work and whatnot into fall of 2027, so about October, November. So that's the entire process that we're going through. I think it's about 57 months, so it's 5 years from where we started. So the detail, I won't go through everything here, but again, you can see where we started back in December, January. We went through these. It's a very prescriptive process that MSBA has for us. We go through first what's called the PDP, or Preliminary Design Program. That's where we develop 23 different options to look at, from repairing and this is Hatherly and Cushing, right? So we're looking at 2 buildings. Repair both of those buildings, do additions and renovations to both of those buildings, look at new options for both of those buildings, and we looked at different enrollments from the 460, which is the K through 5, to 560, which has been voted on, which includes pre-kindergarten. So the 560 students is what is being presented, going to be submitted to the MSBA. So we went from the 23 options down to 6 options at the preferred schematic report. So we tried to whittle this down and get to a preferred solution, which is where we are today, which is with schematic design. So we're just in the process of finishing up that schematic design work, which is going to take us to where we are tonight on 2/7 with public meeting number 6. We're going to have a vote next week with the school building committee to submit what you're going to see tonight with the cost. That happens on submission happens on the 28th of February. And then you see there's a little bit of time working with MSBA staff and ultimately an MSBA board meeting which will vote to approve the project, which will then allow the town to hold their votes, which are already scheduled for a special town meeting on 4/29 with a debt exclusion vote on 5/18. So all really important dates taking us through the process. So we're in public meeting number 6 right now. We also have 2 or 3.
There's 3 more.
3 more planned moving through up until the vote. So there's going to be plenty of opportunity to have further discussion leading up to the other public interest sessions, up to the town votes. So that gives you a sense of the schedule, where we've been, what we've been doing, and where we're going to end up here. Now we're going to start and take you through the project need.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to start from the beginning. This is my 4th year, like I said. When I got there, there had already been a couple of years' worth of work. So we're into year 6 of this process. Assuming we go and get it built in 27, we still got another 3 to go. So it's a real long process. And what the NSBA did to partnership up, and it's a big piece of it because that's the reimbursement piece that we're partnering with the NSBA for. They found that, after looking at all the elementary schools, that Cushing and Hatherly were in the most need. Wampatuck is the oldest by 2 years. We had good bones, good structure, and with some improvements that we'll talk about that we've been putting into them, that could be salvaged for many more years. But these 2 were immediate needs. That's why it was the 2 chosen instead of 1 in a consolidation. And there were several studies on which geographic area would be at this site or Cushing. So all that went into account, and it was decided here. These numbers were also decided by the NSBA. They did a very comprehensive week-long enrollment study of every single classroom in our district, all the elementary schools that is, and made us, in their class size, numbers were higher than ours. And so what they came up with was 460 students for the combination, and the addition is the pre-K, which I'll get to a little bit later in more detail. But after we agreed on the 460 number, originally they came up with 360 quite and we went back and went back and forth till we got the 460 number. And then the pre-K came. The first question we asked, would pre-K be reimbursable? Because we didn't want to add more things onto the project that wouldn't be reimbursable like the projects. And right away they said yes, if approved. So the next thing we did was we went up to the community. We had visioning groups, which were representative of families, teachers, parents, community members, elected officials, all went through a very comprehensive process to get to here. And at every single meeting, I think we had 8 to 10 of these types of meetings as well, we brought that straw poll up about preschool, and it was 100% support. Here's some reasons why the preschool is there. So pre-K is reimbursable. I want to make that clear, and we can talk detailed numbers if anybody wants to, certainly tonight at a later date, and it's a good deal. And expanded access to pre-K addressed the issue of student wait lists. Currently, right now, every year we have waiting lists for pre-K. We can't fit them all in the Wampatuck school. Also, those classrooms getting older and tighter a little bit for those kids. And the one I don't have one here is the playground. We had to put money into the playground to make it accessible to all students. So that right now, if this weren't to go through, we'd have to pour more money into the playground there for preschool as well. So that was the thought with the new school and the playground. There's a money savings there as well. I've been saying this for a couple of years now. That was just my thought that in the educational field and in the circles I run in, that universal pre-K is coming. Massachusetts will probably be one of the first states to do that. Evidence of that recently came out. If you go on the us.gov website or you just Google Governor Healy in preschool, she's committed to that, to gateway cities right now by 26. All gateway cities, that does not include Situate, will have pre-K. And it was an interesting read because she talked about getting all kids high-quality education that should start at age 3 or 4. And then she also said it should be affordable. And then she also talked about parents being able to work because it does double as daycare. And so now both parents, if needed, or single parents can go, or grandparents can go and work and have a place for the kids to go and get educated. So it's a really great thing. It's a visionary thing. And so that's coming down the pike. Eventually, that's going to be for all of us. And I don't think we're going to get a lot of money when that does come. Being the town of Situate, we're going to have to fend for ourselves. So for all these good reasons to have as part of this new school, but also to be a little bit more on the visionary side, that it's coming to our neighborhood and that it's going to be a mandate at some point, I think it's smart of us to prepare for that. So that's the rationale behind the pre-K. And one last thing, this building project is going to be tough to pass. I'm going to tell you why. It's going to be a lot harder than Gates. It's going to be a lot harder than where I came from as principal, Monomoy Regional High School. And everyone could probably put 2 and 2 together, because not every child in the district will funnel through there. Not every family. Depends where you live, right? So if I'm in the Wampatuck district, well, my kid's not going to go there. Why would I go to them? All right? If my kid already went through here, or my kid's going to go here, why would I want to go through that headache and build a new school? All right? So I want to reach out to the community tonight and say that these 2 buildings in the shape they're in is a community need. It's a community issue. It's not a Hatherly issue. It's not a Cushing issue. It's all of our issue. All right? And so I really wanted to point that out. And so then the question comes, all right, well, we've got 2 schools and there's going to be about 90 kids left over. What if that's my kid? I don't want them redistricted. What's your plan for redistricting? And as we've gone around on these listening tours, it's been very clear to me that there's still some trauma, if you will, with the Jenkins, how Jenkins was handled. And there's still some people when I met at the middle school that were very upset still about how that was handled, how they weren't involved in the conversation, how it was kind of just decided, they didn't really understand why, and they were, and it was empty for a while. So all those things that came up, we wanted to avoid that. My original answer to this question was, well, to do things right, you have to do the study about, as late as you can, maybe a year and a half before we have people do the school because of people changing locations, new people moving in. You have to have the most accurate numbers. And I found that answer wasn't acceptable to our community because, I want you to trust me, but we want to verify that. So what I thought would be important, and this was advice from some good parents that suggested that we have a plan. So this is the plan. It'll be an inclusive process, and we'll have seaside, what I call seaside chats, where I go out just like this, even as early as when this thing gets passed next year, start these conversations on redistricting, sitting with the families impacted, right? Which will be a lot of the people that will be in there during construction, and just get their point of view. What do they believe? What's important to them? I'm already getting that feedback right now, and I'll share that with you tonight. Minimize social emotional impact on children. So we know the more you uproot children and move them to different schools, that's tough. The most trying times for kids are every transition in their education, whether it's preschool or kindergarten year, whether that's middle school year and here at 6th grade and then high school year at 9th grade. Those are the toughest times social emotionally for kids, any transition to a new school. So if we are doing that, that's going to be a problem. So we want to impact on the least amount of children and families that we can. So that's a promise. So the goal is, number one goal is to keep 100% of all those kids that are in that school moved over and then try to keep those siblings coming up with them. Because last thing you want to do is you want to move somebody over and have their younger sibling going to Jenkins, and then you're driving that. So I think those are the 2 top priorities, is handling the folks that we have in those buildings during this construction and that are impacted by that and making sacrifices during construction. So those are philosophically 2 of my goals. And then keeping the neighborhoods together. When we start looking at that geography, and we'll share those studies, and we'll look at it, we'll talk about it, and then we'll have to make those decisions. But the goal is, with 92 kids short, is to try to get all those 92 kids in there. And maybe we can, maybe we can't. But I think you'll all have input. So I wanted to make sure that that's a process we have to go through. It's usually not pleasant, especially not pleasant if not handled well. But I think if people are kind of like this whole process are, asked to come to the table, give input, give feedback, be heard, see the statistics, and be part of the process of making the decision. I think it's going to go much better. So I want you to have trust in that process. So that's the redistricting process. Okay. Okay. Move me. Before I get to this, I had a question. We had some of the abutters come in, and I see some there tonight. Specifically meet with them to hear their concern, because they're going to be living right on top of this. And certainly want to hear their feedback. And this young man in the corner, can I ask your name?
Chris.
Chris, nice to see you again. Chris had a great question. It wasn't even about the buildings, it was to me as the superintendent. Says, well, why do you want this? Really, personally, why do you want this? And I want to share that answer that I gave him, because it doesn't change. You know, it's not for notoriety, it's not to get this on my resume, because again, I inherited this. This was already hard work by other people. My educational philosophy and all my decisions are grounded in the fact, since I started 30 years ago, on what would I want for my own kids? Would that teacher be good enough for my kid to be in that class? Would not having a late bus for our students in Boston be good enough if I was one of those parents? Would that be good enough for my kid? Would I want my kid coming to school in 5 years? As the building leaks, the pipes burst, heat stops work, all those things that are going to happen, in spite of having great teachers? And the answer is a hard no. All right, so that's where I'm at with it. So it's a passion of mine. I spend a lot of time on this, certainly, but that's kind of where I'm at. So I think I want what's best for our kids. It's not a BS line. It's how I live and how I make my decisions. And I think if my kid wasn't coming to this school, which they won't be, and I could vote, which I can't, I'd vote for it anyways. It's better for the community than failing buildings that we're going to have to address at some point. And quite honestly, common sense is going to tell you, we're going to see the price tag tonight. It will never get as cheap as it will with this number we're going to give you tonight. So if you think in 5 years, if we kick the can, it's going to get cheaper. It won't. All right, so that's my spiel on that.
We'll jump in.
Good.
Unless you want.
No, go ahead, I'll jump in.
Okay. So we're going to take you through some of the physical needs of both buildings, so you get a sense of what we're dealing with the existing conditions.
Yeah, so just general overview. The big things, there's a whole big long list of issues with Hatherly and Cushing, but the main sort of ideas, the spaces in the building, many of the educational spaces are undersized, and there are many spaces, mostly special educational spaces, that are just missing, or they're using substandard space to fulfill the mission that they need to fulfill. So there's inappropriate spaces, like there's a closet over here that's being used as an PT room, that kind of stuff. There's a mechanical room with a fan going all the time. Those sorts of things. There is very little meeting space. I can attest to this because I'm trying to have meetings here. There's very little meeting space here. The modular classrooms in the back were supposed to be a 5-year solution. They're here 20 years on, and they're really kind of falling apart. But I think probably the biggest thing is the building systems, the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems of the building are really at or beyond their life expectancy. So, as we said prior, both Hatherly and Cushing have needs, but in terms of the marginal edge, Hatherly has it in terms of being the school with the greatest needs. So that's really where the MSBA went in terms of the vehicle for this project. It's the Hatherly putting the two together. So this, many of these photos are on the boards as you walked in, but just to kind of reiterate a little bit, there's site drainage issues, there's accessibility issues, and just the pavement condition out in front of the building. I noticed that this crosswalk is nicely painted now. That's very sweet. Change the fact that it's still in pretty rough shape. The windows on both buildings are, really the sills are just kind of rotting and paint's coming off. There's very little insulation in that kind of board assembly underneath the windows. The roofs on both buildings, the center section is very flat. That's the way they used to build flat roofs. They didn't really have a lot of slope. So water sits up there, and leaks start to happen. And this area right here is very known for leaks at certain times of the year. There's issues with moisture coming out. There's actually a mechanical trench that runs around the outside of the building. and it's just basically this dank area that dank air kind of blows up and forms that green stuff on the outside of the building. Modulars, they're coming apart. Half of this one in the back here had to have a rubber roof put on it when the other roof was no longer in service. They're really coming apart. Inside, there's numerous accessibility issues. The district has made some accommodations. There's a lift here that serves that little staircase that separates the two wings, and that's fine. It technically meets the code, but it's very hard to use. It's very cumbersome. It breaks a lot. It's noisy, and it's kind of embarrassing for kids to have to use that view. Getting in and out of toilet rooms, very difficult. Numerous accessibility issues within the toilet rooms. And then, as I was saying, mechanical, electrical. This is the original electrical equipment for the building. So, 1960s electrical switchgear, very hard to find replacement parts. These are not the original boilers, but they're pretty old and they're fairly inefficient. So that's another thing. Electrically, there's, we live in an age now where a lot of things run on electricity, and there just aren't enough plugs in the walls around the outside of the building. So teachers end up using power strips. Sometimes the power strips are daisy chained together. Not a good situation. And then the roof, as I was saying before, roof leaks. This Tectum roof deck doesn't really work well when it gets wet. So that's not a great situation. So if you wanted to talk to this one, this is really about keeping up.
So, I remember my first year here, it was about this time of year because it was budget season, and I went in before the select board. I'd already gone to the school committee and survived that process, and then went through the front of the select board. And I got a lot of this, and you got to be more responsible with your money. There's capital money out there that you haven't spent. This and that, this and that, and they were right. It was really the best advice and input I could get, because we really had to take a hard look, at how we were using hard-earned taxpayer money and soundly investing it in our schools to build trust. And I wanted to share with you, and this is a collaborative method, and I'm not saying it because some people in the room here, the town administrator, Nancy Holt, select board, capital, finance advisory, these are some of the most professional and collaborative people that I've had the pleasure of working with. And of course, our great school committee. But all of this doesn't happen in every town. They had to all say yes to this. They all had to go through some rigorous question and accountability. So I want to thank all of them, and I know some are in the room, so I want to thank you. But the whole goal here, and a lot of this was through capital money, and the focus was that we would put money into the other schools that were aging proactively, so that we are not coming back in 5 years and saying, we need a new Wampatuck, right? Because that's the oldest one. And we're not, because that's the best tones. You'll see that we've got a focus here. High school is pretty old too, right? So I think what we wanted to do with this slide, and what we want to do when we go and ask for your hard-earned tax dollars to build this new school that many of you might not benefit directly from your children, but it will be better for the community, is that we have proven we're taking care of the other buildings. So just some examples, and you can read them, and again, this will be on the website. New floors, a new parking lot, portico for the exterior at Wampatuck. Just this summer, we had 2 roof projects going. It was like a construction site at this school. A lot of work, a lot of great work in the summer. $950 grand at Jenkins. I don't think that roof was ever right, from what the teachers tell me from day one. And last year they came to me and said, we need a new roof. And I said, wow. We priced it out to be about $1 million. And I said, I don't know if we can find that money in capital and get that through. Until I went over there one day on one of the hard rainy days. And teachers are walking around, and kids are walking around buckets of rain, just literally coming through in the majority of the classrooms. It was real. All right, so I just wanted to show you some of these things and where we're putting our emphasis on the other schools. The high school, again, new roof, HVAC unit. Some of the stuff that is not on here, we used, I think, smartly with ESSER money, CARES Act money. That is running out this year. So the CARES money was a lot of HVAC and other things that we were able to use, so we wouldn't have to tap into some of this capital money. So that's kind of what happens here, is you probably don't see a lot of Hatherly and Cushing up here. The teachers, the parents, the families have been pretty patient, understanding that why put a new roof on this when in 3 years, hopefully, we have a new building. That would make a lot of sense, but they've been patient. Okay, you saw the windows here. We've had to throw some, what I call good money after bad, by just repairing things like that just to get through. So a lot of this money that we've asked for over the last 3 years through capital will, if we don't get this, are going to come to these two schools. And then those things are not going to be taken care of. So that you might need a new water duct at some point. So that's my rationale, just to show that we have a plan, we've been responsible, not keeping our buildings. Next slide.
So Bill mentions the money coming to these schools. When we do the initial study, we develop costs. Our baseline options, in this case options, which is Cushing and Hatherly, are to look at what would it cost to repair these buildings, basically make them like new, right? So to do the roof, to do the mechanical system, do the electrical, make it buildings fully accessible, take care of the building envelope. Those are the repair costs. They do not address any space needs. They do not address any programmatic needs. They just fix the buildings, right? Because of the study that we've gone through, we've learned that if you just fix the buildings, it doesn't meet Situate's needs, right? It doesn't meet the needs of the proper special education space, of the properly sized classrooms, media center, libraries. The gymnasium here has classrooms all around, right? You don't want classrooms immediately off a gymnasium, right? So none of that would be fixed, would be repaired. You just fix the building. So to do that for the two buildings costs you $62 million today. To do a $62 million project, you need to close the two schools, move everybody out, fix them, and get it done. There's no place to put the students to do a $62 million project. So you say, how can we get the project done? You're not going to do $6.5 million a year, as Bill mentioned. You're going to try to take as big a chunk as you can. So what we did is a calculation. We said we could probably phase it over 6 years with some modular classrooms, moving some students in and out, getting some work done over that time frame. The current escalation for construction is about 5% annually, right? So the $62 million escalated over 6 years brings it up to about $80.6 million, right? So you're like, wow, that's a lot of money. And probably the most important point here is because we're not meeting Situate's needs as identified and shared with MSBA, MSBA is not going to participate in that work. So that's 100% borne on the town of Situate. John's going to get into the detail, but a little sneak peek is that when we developed the building costs and took into consideration the reimbursement that the state is providing, we're about $82.9 million town share for a new school that will solve the issues for two schools. Right? So Cushing and Hatherly, everything will be solved with a new school building, properly sized spaces, the right number of spaces, pre-kindergarten in this building for a town share of $82.9 million. So for roughly $2 million more, you get a new building done all at one time, as opposed to being done over a 6-year period. New building project, as I mentioned, done fall of 27. Renovation project, fall of 32. So it takes more time to get all that repair work done. Highly disruptive to students, I mentioned no educational spaces, and diverts the maintenance funding, as Bill mentioned, from the other buildings back in the air. So that's where we are with that. That's hugely important, to probably be reiterated again later. So something to think about as you say, okay, what if we just fix the buildings? This is what happens.
Okay, so site planning, we've covered a lot of the site planning issues in previous meetings, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. Just a few updates on this. I mean, the site plan that you're seeing here is kind of where we've ended up at the end of schematic design. There's more design detail. There's a lot more detail in terms of how the playgrounds are oriented and structured, And we've got a lot more detail inside the courtyards, which you can see there. But the basic ideas are the same. They really haven't changed from what we've been talking about. We still have, I'm just going to go to the next one. We still have the basic idea of bus circulation around the outside. Car drop-off circulation kind of coming through to this drop-off area in the front of the building here. We can queue about 70 cars off the road, and then there's another queuing space for another 30 cars that are leaving the site. So at any one time, we can have about 100 cars on the site and off of Van Vinyl Road at any given moment. We also have pre-K park and drop lot, if you want to call it that. Parents can park their car and actually walk their kids in the front door if they want, or there is an option to bring them around to the side door. We think most people are going to come in the front. That's sort of how the site plan is shaping up to be oriented. And then walkers will come in. There's a really kind of a classic crosswalk within the site, so it's off of the Van Vinyl Road scene there, where kids will cross over. There will be a crossing guard there, and then everybody moves up the same side of the road along the building and then goes in the front, or they could go inside. So that's all very similar to what we've had in the past. Some of you might have seen a version of this drawing. This is kind of a mid-phase 1 construction plan drawing, which shows the division between where the new building is going to be going and where the construction activity is in this kind of orange zone, and where the existing building is going to be here. It's obviously very tight. So the very important thing is keeping the kids away from construction. So we're going to build a walkway on the other side of the road and either circulate kids around or straight up through. We'll have pretty much the same kind of drop-off area here. Additional parking, but we're losing some parking here. So we'll have some temporary parking here, a temporary play area. And this was really designed in the beginning. The lawn kind of out in the front of the building was designed as a play area in the beginning. So it's fairly flat right now. So that could be a pretty easy thing. We're going to reuse the existing playground in the back and keep all of the play areas intact here and try to keep the construction away from that as much as possible to sort of reuse and give as much space in the back of the building. Flannery Field obviously will not be in use during the construction area, so that's something that the town will have to work out in terms of use in other places. But it also keeps the construction away from the wetlands and it keeps it away from the kids.
And the entire construction site will be fenced in, away from the school site and away from the
Right.
Not with that fence.
Not with this fence.
How high is the fence?
It's generally a 6-foot high chain link fence. And I haven't got to the detail yet. Sometimes we scrim it so you can't get it.
And in areas where it's really close to something, you will actually put a concrete jersey barrier at the bottom and the fence on top of that. So like if we need to have armoring at the bottom. That works. So this next segment is really starting to talk about the outside of the building, what the building looks like. And what we, as Bill was saying in the beginning, we had a very productive and deep visioning process at the beginning where we really explored what were the core values that we wanted to employ in the building. Purposeful innovation, making sure that the building and the spaces in the building set people up to be creative. Having universal design for learning, which is an educational philosophy, but we wanted to make sure that aspects of the building supported that educational philosophy that the district uses. Making community connections, making sure that parts of the building, the public areas of the building, the center, the core, were accessible for people to use in the off hours when it's not being used in the school. And the same with some of the site facilities on the outside. Making sure, and Jason and I will probably tag team on this one in a minute, making sure that there are connections between the inside and the outside so that generally the views from classrooms, from educational spaces are looking at nature and looking at views, not looking at parking and driveways and things like that. And then, very important, obviously, in this day and age, site and building safety. And we've done a number of things to make the building a safer place. In terms of the imagery of the outside of the building, we really took our inspiration from the coast of Situate and the natural environment around here, and just different textures, different colors, materials that we see, the pebble beaches, actually the unique sound that the beaches make, the waves make on the beach, and the crackling of the cobblestones is an amazing thing, the grass and so forth. So taking ideas like that, the shape of rocks, the kind of the shape of the land, and just taking some of those elements and trying to pull them into the building. So we'll just kind of start as you sort of first come onto the site. Here's a view from Vinyl Road of what the new building would look like. The driveway that you see here is more or less exactly where the drive is now. Pretty much follows the same path that kind of curves up to the right. So the new building is here. It's a 2-story building on the front end, and it's kind of 2 and 1 stories in the back side. And it's divided between upper elementary and the lower elementary. So this is the lower elementary wing that we're looking at here. We have basically 3 materials here. We've got a variegated brick, which is kind of recalls those the cobbles that you see on the beach, the different colors of the stones and cobbles. We've got a metal panel, a vertical metal panel, which has striations, and it actually has a kind of a wood grain on it, kind of embossed on the metal panel, so it really looks like wood. It's very thick, very tough, very durable panel, and that recalls those kind of the beach fences, the snow fences that you see on the beach dunes. And then you also have just the form of the building, kind of the ups and downs that really recall, shapes of the dunes or the shapes of the hills or the shapes of the rocks on the beach, and those sorts of things. So here's a view from the front. So we've kind of come up the drive, and now we're sort of looking at the front of the building. Here's the entryway here. This happens to be the library, and the library was designed to be at the front of the building, kind of like a beacon. It's a very glassy element, and it's really sort of the showpiece that's symbolizing learning on display at the front door. So then we kind of come around, and we're looking at the entryway. We come around it to a different angle. Much like the beach grass that we were talking about before, we have a kind of a treatment on the glass to make it look like it has these sort of abstract grass blades kind of embossed on the glass. And that also has a technical aspect of keeping the sun out, but it's also an interesting pattern to look at. And then kind of overlooking, Jason and I and a bunch of other people on the team worked really hard on this aspect. I was talking before about classrooms always looking out into nature. We have a sensory garden here, which is one little natural aspect as the kids come up, looking out on the playground. In the middle of the building, which is really where the core is and where the administration is. Sorry guys in the administration, you're looking at the front, you're kind of keeping an eye on what's going on at the front door. And then we have the northern classroom wing here, which again is looking out on the fields or looking back into the trees in the back of the site.
Maybe point out Flannery there.
Yeah, so this is the new Flannery Field, which will replace eventually the old Flannery Field that we're building the building on. So it's more or less the same size, a slightly different shape, but would be big enough for soccer and lacrosse. And this is kind of a view looking, imagine if you're in a plane or you're a bird, you're kind of coming in looking a little bit more at the building. And again, we were talking about before the kind of gentle sweep of the top of the building, recalling those landforms. Playground here, this long skinny playground is actually 2 playgrounds. There's a younger elementary playground, which is directly adjacent to the younger kids wing here in the lower elementary school, and then an older, 1-2 playground here, so there'll be some differentiation in the equipment that's out there. Everything will be fully accessible. And then over on the other side is a grade 3 through 5 playground, and then they also have the use of the field. Anyone can use the field. We also have these 2 courtyards in here. They're the larger of the 2, or the lower elementary is built around, is also designed to be an educational play space. So there's play equipment in there. There are spaces for activities that are inside to spill out, like art and music. There's a place for assembly. There's a place for outdoor classroom to happen, or outdoor learning to happen there. So same with that one. And then the other one over here has kind of an outdoor gardening, a container gardening area, and then another outdoor classroom as well. So lots of interesting stuff happening. So these 2 next images are just kind of zooming in and taking a little bit of a look more at the texture of the building. And I'll just point out here, we have these pieces of trim on the windows that they're design elements, but they're also designed specifically to protect the glass and glazing from direct sunlight hitting it at certain times of the day. So because this is an east-facing elevation, the harshest sun is going to be coming from basically where I'm standing from the side. So these pieces of sunshade that stick out shade the glass at that point of the day. And then this image really shows that same concept as you're coming up the building here. Again, the variegated brick at the bottom, and then this terrace here as well. So that's sort of an overview of the outside of the building, what the building looks like. And we're going to jump inside, look at some of the inside images. Again, much the same, working off of that seaside imagery and taking some of those same design elements, but using them a little bit differently on the inside. This is a view taken right inside the main lobby. So if we're looking at the plan, basically taken right here, looking in the main lobby area. We've designed a family reception area. We're going to have some very comfortable furniture in there. There might even be a sink or some, or a kind of a little kitchenette for coffee or tea or some things like that. A place for parents to come and feel welcome when they first walk in. A place to, say, wait if you're going to have a meeting. A place to meet your child if you're taking them out of school. Any of those kinds of things. Looking through, there's a kind of a 2-story space beyond this, which is a gallery, and this is a space where students' work will be on display. So that was one of the core concepts of the design when we first were talking about this, was put learning on display when you come to the front door. So having an art room right behind this space here, where you can see in and see what's happening with the art, having the music room down the hall, being able to hear that when you first walk in the building, having the art on the wall in the gallery space, walking down through there, and there's a tall, this is a tall space with light on the top, with windows on the top, with clerestory windows, and then there's a stair at the end, which is going to be very glassy and transparent, so lots of light and space filling that. And then sort of turning around from that, in this space here, the yellow space, this is the library that we looked at from the outside. So now we're seeing that it's called a thridding technique on the glass that looks like abstract of the beach grass. And you can see how that's going to let light into the space and make it very bright in there. Lovely views to the outside. Reading areas and areas for gathering up close to the windows on the outside of the books and the stacks in the back here. And then this is kind of taken from the outside, looking back into the entrance of the library. Very tall space, very interesting for kids reading. then further on in the building, in the middle of the building, we have this feature here where the gym, the cafeteria, and the stage are all sort of put together in one space. So the stage will actually have a connection between the itself and the gym to the back, and then you'll also face into the cafeteria as well. And so that'll be a very flexible space. It's fully accessible. It has a ramp on both sides coming up to it, so completely accessible from the front and back. And it will really allow for these spaces to be used very flexibly for a small performance or something like that on this side, or you could open it up and have a large performance on the back side from the gym side. So very flexible. And then this is another view kind of taken from the other side of the cafeteria. And now we're looking out through that tall glass curtain wall, looking out into the north courtyard. So these are those container gardens that I was talking about in there. And then there's another outdoor classroom space. So basically an open space that could be programmed for just about anything. So really, again, stressing from every place where kids are spending a lot of time, that there's some access to natural light and views. Very, very important for children's well-being. And then this extended learning area here, this is a view that's taken actually right here in the kindergarten wing, so taken this way, looking down at that stair. And the main idea here is the extended learning area is an extension of the classroom. The doorways to the classrooms are here and here, and there's, you'll see in the next image, there's some glazed area there as well. Jason, I don't know if you want to talk
Yeah,
about
this idea is becoming more and more prevalent in school design, and it was something that was born out of our visioning effort, a sort of recognition that students today learn differently than students when I went to school, and that necessitates a different kind of space. And so in addition to the classroom, there are these kinds of spaces sprinkled around the building to give teachers more resources to deliver their instruction. We've tried to position them, as Tom was mentioning, immediately outside of classrooms. So you can imagine perhaps there's an adult and a small group of kids working out here on a particular project, or a specialist who would otherwise either take a student down to an office somewhere is actually coming to the child and helping deliver those support services right near their classroom where their peers are. And there's no stigma associated with a space like this because everybody has access to it and everybody can use it as they see fit. So there's a handful of these scattered around the project on both floors.
And then this is a view taken from a classroom that's directly adjacent to that space that we were just looking at. So that doorway that I was gesturing to was kind of around the corner of the cubbies there. That's this opening here. So from the classroom, you can see out into the extended learning area and straight out into the courtyard. So you have that straight shot through that gives you that connection, visual, audio connection to the outside.
Tom mentioned flexibility a few minutes ago. These kinds of features are meant to be consistent with flexibility. So for example, if a teacher wanted to have a lot of flow between that extended learning space and her classroom, then this opening could be a 3-foot opening or it could be a 6-foot opening. They have full control over that. If they're not comfortable with the idea of students being in more than one space at a time, then they can teach in this space as any conventional classroom that we might have. They have the flexibility to do that. So these kinds of features, as we mentioned, are largely about providing teachers with more spatial resources and the flexibility to use them as they see fit in their day-to-day instruction.
Tom said it was inadvertent, but the waves are the waves of anxiety as we get to the line.
Not at all. Imagine.
He said it was just because Situate's on the ocean.
The
So.
sound of the ocean.
Next slide, please. Okay, so to kind of take you all through the budget process, right? So far to date, before we got into the last 5 or 6 weeks, we had been dealing with the preferred schematic report. If you've seen any of the presentations, they were big, just single-digit 120.1 million, big round numbers, a lot of money, right? But this was what was in the preferred schematic. We said we had a construction budget of $92.4 million. We added 30% for soft costs. What are soft costs? Soft costs are everything from the architect, from me, yes, architect, owner, chairs, computers, anything that if you picked up the building and shook it would fall out, falls into that category, as well as contingency, the buckets of money that we put aside for just in case as the project moves along. So we said, okay, at the PSR, we had a $120.1 million budget. We anticipated that the MSBA grant would be around 28%, and then that would result in a town share of about $86.4 million. Fast forward to schematic design. Basically, so the folks understand that PSR, the designs that were looked at by the one cost estimator at the time, very diagrammatic, very much based on total square footage, kind of a 30,000 foot number. The design right now is basically 30% in the lifespan of the design. It's actually beyond what most people in the industry would call schematic. The MSBA requires that it be actually the start of a design development set. It's hundreds of pages of, over 100 pages of drawings. It's over 1,000 pages of specifications. Those drawings went out to two estimators. Their estimator, who had seen it once already, and our estimator, who had never seen it. They both look at it, and why we do that is because if they come back with wildly different numbers, you say, wait a minute, what are the assumptions that these estimators are doing? If we don't work this out early, this could become a real problem at bid time, right? If something's not understandable. So this is a process that we did now, and we reconciled those. We'll also say that they came in higher than expected. We looked at some value items, and we brought the number back down. So we arrived at a construction budget, and that process that we did in schematic design with an approved project, we'll do again in design development, and we'll do again in construction documents to make sure that we stay on this budget all the way through, because we're committing to the MSBA and to the citizens of Situate that this is the number. It can't go any higher, right? And we want to make sure that we keep those contingencies in our pocket for just in case later. So at the end of the day, now your simple two-line explanation actually became a spreadsheet that I'm not going to, I tortured people with it last night, I won't go through tonight. Basically now became about a 120-line spreadsheet, which fully details, these are the summaries of each of the major sections, okay? And it breaks down to your construction budget, your feasibility study agreement. That's the $1.1 million that you already voted on that has this team here working for you right now. You have your administration for the project moving forward, that's us. You have your architect and engineer. You have miscellaneous project costs. Well, what's that? That's things like utility connections, things like third-party testing that's required by the building code. Moving, how do we move two schools worth of stuff into the new building? That's miscellaneous. FF&E and technology, furniture, fixture, equipment, and tech is, computers, projectors, those sorts of things. On top of that, we then carry a 5% construction contingency. So $4.7 million for just in case. Again, it's money that you have to vote for, but that we only use if we need. That's the what if for construction. Then we carry an additional 2% for owner's contingency for all of these other items if any of those run over. If there's a sudden spike in the furniture market, and the cost of steel goes up like it did, during COVID, those sorts of things. Again, so you've got a total of 4.7, 1.8, so 6.5 million that's in this budget that gets held aside and only gets used with the approval of the building committee of the project. Total project budget, 120, 142, 469. Did pretty darn good. We got right to where the PSR was. Why it's even better than that is because we also now included the Cushing demo and abatement for 2.8 million, which was below the line when we submitted the PSR. So we had the 120.1, but then people said, well, what's it going to cost for the Cushing abatement, demo, and make it a field? We said it's about 2.7, 2.8. That's now part of the 120. Before it wasn't. Also, the town asks, there's some force main work that may have to be done out on Ann Vinyls, basically to take the waste from the project and push it upstream. We're working with some outside designers right now to assess that pipe, but we figured if this is the time to plan for it, let's put the cost in there. So we've got $360,000 for that, plus $75,000 of design. baked into these numbers here as well. So between the Cushing and the Ann Vinyl work, you get $3.5 million more of scope in here than was here at PSR. And then also, so wait a minute, how were we able to pull that off? You know, we prior had said 30% soft costs, working with the team, looking at the numbers. Now soft costs are 26% of the overall budget, no longer 30. No, 26% of construction as opposed to 30. So that's where we are with the total project budget right now. And again, when this goes into the MSBA, this is what we're voting. This is what they see. This is what the town votes. And you say, well, wait a minute. You're into, most importantly, the share. Anticipated grant, you know, when we fill out this sheet and do all the calculations, is showing us that effectively, if your grant comes in at 37 million, again, higher than the 33, your share is now 82.9 as opposed to 86.5. Well, how did that happen? Well, early on in PSR, when we were doing our estimates, the MSBA had a lower cost per square foot that they were reimbursing. Again, the MSBA will reimburse Situate a base rate right now of 43% of eligible costs, plus some added incentive points. That 43 will go up roughly 4 points for the type of HVAC system we chose, as well as about 1 point to 1.5 points for maintenance for all the good work that the town does, taking care of its buildings, the capital expenditures that the superintendent talked about. That all figures into it. So 43 plus 4 is 47, plus what we hope is 1.5 is 48.5. Well, that 48.5 is on eligible costs, okay? And the MSBA only reimburses the first $550 per square foot of construction cost and $50 per square foot per site, for a total of $605. Well, wait a minute. Going construction costs these days are in the high 800s, almost 900. So basically that means they will pay the 47 or 48.5% of the first 605 and then 0 from 606 up to whatever the final bid number is of the project. When you run it through all the calculations and say, if this is our grant and this is our total, 37 into 120 is the 31% effective rate, when your reimbursement rate is, we're targeting 48.5. You say, well, wait a minute, that's not the same. It has never been the same. It wasn't the same like Gates. When you did Gates, that's the way the MSBA works. They always seem to be chasing what the true value of the market is. It's calculations that they do to spread their funding as far as they can when they invite new projects in. As an example, when oh, actually, I'll get to that in just a second. Let's jump to the next slide. Okay, what's it going to cost the taxpayer? Nancy is here to help answer questions. The phones are out taking pictures. Basically, if the share of the town is 82.9, the estimated taxpayer impact on the median $921,000 home in the first year is $869, and the estimated taxpayer impact on the 25th year of a borrow for that same home is $416.
Assessed value.
Assessed value. Not what Zillow says your house is worth, what the town of Situate says your house is worth. Estimated total taxpayer impact over a 25-year period for that median home is $16,070. Again, estimate subject to change, when you buy it, when you borrow, how much you borrow, timing of the borrowing, based on a 25-year bond, and the town's financial advisor has recommended we assume a conservative 4.75% interest rate. So I'm going to stop there. Any question you have on this? I am bouncing to Nancy in the corner here, and that's why she's here. So, actually, I've only got a couple more, and then we're going to be wrapping up. So let's finish the next couple of budget slides, and then we'll move on. So people ask, what happens with if there's a yes vote, if there's a no vote? If there's a yes vote, it's pretty simple, right? Basically, the project scope and budget that gets submitted at schematic design for the $120.1 million, basically, back up one step. When we submit this in February, when the board approves it in April, they will sign a project scope and budget agreement with the town of Situate that says we memorialize the project as designed, as submitted on those plans for the dollars that are on the budget sheet that we're talking about that are 120.1. If you vote yes, basically that moves towards what's called a project funding agreement, which is the document with which they say, okay, you've proven to us, Situate, that you're going to vote for this project. You've sent us the vote. You've sent us your commitment. Here's our project funding agreement, which commits our $30+ million back to you. Okay, that's the project funding agreement. And then the design follows the timeline that Don shared at the beginning. It's game on, right from the day after town meeting, getting documents signed and all that. That design moves ahead, and we're breaking ground in roughly a year. Construction commences in the summer or fall of 25, and students are at the building in 27. What happens with a no vote? And that is a no vote at either the town meeting or the ballot. Both of them matter, okay? The town doesn't proceed any further in the process, okay? It have to make this point very clear. Because you've signed a project scope and budget agreement, if you vote no on either of these, the project is dead. People will say, well, wait a minute, the MSBA has a failed vote policy. The failed vote policy is not for a quote-unquote plan B. Well, we can change it, let's just do the renovation. No, the failed vote policy is so that if you missed either the town meeting vote or the ballot by a few votes, you as a town have the ability to go, oh crap, sorry, we were so close, how can we fix this, right? That's what that failed vote policy gives you. It buys you time, because you have, from when they approved this project in April, 120 days to get back to them with proof that the citizens support the project.
Same project.
Same project. This is the project. What's on here.
Can't reduce the price, can't reduce
the price.
Same
If you want to change the project, don't steal my thunder, John. If you want to change the project, you are starting over. Not just going backwards a few steps, going back to the statement of interest process in the beginning. And what's really important, and I'll show you on the next slide, is that that process to get here from when you first submitted that statement of interest, it's been almost 5 years. Take this $120 million project and use the average escalation of where we're settling now to 5%. In 5 years, this same project will be $153 million. It's just math. Everything goes up, all right? And so a new statement of interest, and more importantly, that $60 million of work that was alluded to by Don earlier to repair these buildings has to start. So if ultimately the plan is you have to replace these buildings at some point, you may be doing it without the MSBA, and you're going to be doing it for more than it is right now. Because in order to achieve the dollars to get it done right away, where are the kids going to go? You have to move them out in order for that $30 million to be effectively spent to get the repairs done. You'd have to relocate them, do the repairs, and again, in the end, you would have a building whose systems have been fixed and the roof are fixed, but you still have classrooms around a gymnasium. So you haven't improved the educational delivery at all to the school. Yeah, I think we're good. Okay, next slide.
So John, one more thing on that, right, is even setting aside the 5 years and the sunk maintenance costs into those buildings, right? Can you just talk to us a little bit about, like, how easy is it to even get back into line?
The next slide. So basically, this is, yeah, please, thank you. This was Situate's story to get where we are right now. You submitted a statement of interest in May of 2020. You were invited to eligibility in April of 21. You were invited to feasibility in March of 22. You were told you could go ahead and go get your OPM in July of 22. We got the designer on board 6 months later, and we're submitting the schematic design 14 months after that. It was 46 months. Well, wait a minute, you said 5 years. Yeah, because you're going to miss the window for the statement of interest this year. They're due on April 12th. We won't have even gone through the town process yet. The MSBA won't have approved your project yet, nor will there have been a town meeting or a town vote. So add an extra year to that. So, and that's assuming that you were going to just submit the statement of interest and they were going to say, come on back in, Situate. Why would they invite you in if you just said no? You've just gone through a very deliberative process which says this is the solution. And we get it, right? These numbers stink. I said to this part people in this group before when I was doing one of these presentations, I live in Duxbury. We built a middle high school for 3 times as many kids for the same price of what your building is. But I can tell you this isn't just a Situate problem. We're doing elementary schools in Stoughton and Dedham as well right now, and Hopkinton actually. 4 different architects, all the same rough price point. Construction costs are roughly the same. The variations come in with the sites. Some sites are a little, have rock in them, some have a little more water in them. That's the real difference between costs here. Next slide. Just to kind of show you too, what this is from the MSBA site, where I would suggest please go on the site. There's a ton of info. They have a really blinding graph that shows kind of costs and what's happened, and they've tracked construction costs on average as of December of every year. I said, instead of saying December 31st, 2013, I said 2014. But you can see 331, 374, look where we are. You know, you're in the bucket of 2025 because that's roughly when you would bid. And you say, well, wait a minute, you know, if I do the math on what you showed me, John, you're at 880. Yeah, this is an average of 790. The projects that were earlier are lower than the 790. The projects that are recent, like us, when I mentioned Situate, Dedham and Stoughton, are all higher than the 790. So, again, just as an example, your cost per square foot right now is, before someone does the math, is $878. But remember, the Cushing demo is in that, right? $25 is what the Cushing demo represents in a cost per square foot. So you're $878 minus 25, you're about $853 for cost of construction. So you're about $60 higher than this number. But as you can see, this is what killed us right here. It was the post-COVID inflation, right? You know, you see this big jump of 18 and 8, you know, and then 9. It's high, but what I will say is we are now carrying roughly 5% escalation. You say, well, what's the difference? The difference is, if you look, these are all bid results. These last 2 years that are projected by the MSBA are schematic design numbers. When we have estimators that give us these numbers, including your own, we don't want to be estimating that 94 million as the bid day win number. We want the middle of the pack number. We want, when we open the bids on bid day, the Situate residents to be happy to say, oh heck, we came in $1 million under, $2 million under, as you have a history of doing with your public bidding. We're not doing a good job for you as a team if we are trying to give you that bid day win number, because if that's the win number, that 94 million, and it comes in at 95, we're over budget. We're over budget right out of the gate. We're saying 94 with the understanding that, you know, as the middle of the pack number of 94, maybe the low bid is 90 and second place is 92, and then you get 94, and someone's high at 100, and we're going to go with that low bidder. So, again, and the other thing too about the cost data, again, there's projects as big as Lowell High School in these numbers, and as small as a 200-person elementary school in Western Mass. So it's kind of just an overall general view of all the projects that are on the MSBA docket. And again, it goes back way before 2014. It goes back another 8 or 10 years of what they've been tracking. Slide.
We're almost there.
We're almost to questions.
Thank you for your patience. A lot of information, a lot to digest. This will be up on the school's website, so please go in there, dive in, and try to digest it all. So next steps, mentioned earlier, actually before the 28th, we have a school building committee meeting on the 15th, where they're anticipating voting on the project, to then submit to the MSBA on the 28th. We have 7, 8, 9 public forums already scheduled for the 6th to 21st of March and then April 2nd. The MSBA board will vote on the project on April 24th, and we'll be working back and forth with them between the 28th and the 24th, just make sure everything's in order. By the time we get to that board meeting, they will be approving it unless there was some fatal flaw in there, which we don't see. And quite honestly, we've never experienced that in the 17 other MSBA projects that we've done. And then April 29th, special town meeting, May 18th.
Just one more quick question, one more quick point. You've seen the number tonight, you've seen the town share. At the end of the day, that's based on the information that we have right now. The estimate of the cost isn't going to change. What what could fluctuate slightly is the MSBA's reimbursement. We are using the 43% reimbursement rate that you were assigned as a town when you signed the feasibility study agreement. Reimbursement rates are looked at every year by the MSBA. They have a base category, they have a need category, they have a like a financial multiplier in there, or for the average salary in the town, those sorts of things. So that 43 could go up or down, probably tenths of a point. Also, we're assuming that we're going to get 1.5 incentive points from the MSBA for the maintenance program. They may say, no, you should get 1.6. They may say it should be 1.4. We have requested that. So if you see this and say, well, wait a minute, you said the town share was 82.8 and suddenly it's 80, I know you won't say anything if I say it's 82.4, but if it jumps up to 83, that would be the reason why. We've requested those numbers from MSBA. And in reality, we don't know the actual final grant number until after we submit the schematic design on the 28th. And roughly 2 weeks after we submit it, they call us to go through this budget over on a call with the entire project team in the district and run through it and say, we agree with you here, we don't agree with you there, we gave you a few more points here, a few less points there. That's a really important meeting, because it's after that meeting that we know for sure what that grant number will be. And that will be the number that we can read at town meeting, and it will be in the vote language, right? All of that will be solidified at that point. But if there is a little wobble between now and then, we're trying to balance the need to get a number out there with the reality that, you can't see it here, see the big red draft on this? It's draft, but it's really close. And that's the reason for any variations as we come into the finish line here.
I have a question for you, my friend. And
Sure.
Thank you very much for a comprehensive meeting here tonight. Very familiar with all the construction among town's public building commission. Let's not kid ourselves. Construction costs keep taking off, right?
Yes.
And you comfortable with that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? So,
I see your construction cost estimate, and I'm not doubting you, but I see them every day.
Understood.
And you said, I think you said that the HVAC was in. You're trying to figure that out, right? You weren't sure how the HVAC was going to go? Is that what you said?
No, the HVAC, that was one of the decisions that was made in the last few weeks about which system we were going to have.
Are you going to go with geothermal?
No.
Good.
Geothermal was more.
No, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
We're going.
And that was one of the options we looked at.
We're going with a dual fuel system.
Oh, good. Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
And the bill.
So that's what I was. That's my only concern. I think you guys did a great job, and I commend you for all you did so far. But I was just concerned. I see those costs going off the charts.
Understood. And we have, we have multiple projects going on in our office. Don and his team have multiple projects going on in their office, and all of these school projects follow this model. Submit a number, and a year from then, cross your fingers. I think the estimators have done really well with, if you look back on that chart, in 21 and 22, I think we were all pulling our hair out a little bit because we get an estimate 1 week, and the next week, see what happened? I had hair when I started my company. What happened is you would go ahead a month, and the cost per square foot from the estimator jumped $100 because they were getting burned. I will tell you that what we see now is a leveling a little bit. I mean, what we see more of a problem with now is lead times. Lead times is the hangover. Lead times is the hangover from COVID. So how do we combat that? When we look at the schedule with Thorne Whittier, we've been very successful on projects because the town made a decision to do design bid build, right? So basically go with the GC like you've done all your other capital projects, which means you don't start working with your builder until bid day. But what we've done in the schedule is we've built in 2 or 3 month procurement periods where we say, you're not putting a shovel in the ground, get all your submittals done, order your air handling units, order your generator, order your elevator, your big switch gear and those sorts of things. Get it all, know that that paperwork's all good, and then we'll put a shovel in the ground. And what that does is that prevents Situate from spending money on the contractor being in the field and running a site office with nothing to do while they're doing their paperwork. So
Yeah, we've experienced it.
yeah, so I think we're, you know, I'll be nervous until bid day because that's just part of the job, right? But at the end of the day,
you know,
we feel confident.
Yeah.
2 questions. What are the design and construction features that are being built into the process to make it as much of a green, don't have the word green building, but make it as much of a green building as possible?
So,
and second,
yeah, go ahead.
and
Mark
secondly,
2.
and Nancy can probably answer this. Not that I hope this is not going to happen, but what is the cost to the town to get to the April 29th? What have we expended in terms of dollars if we should fail at that meeting?
That's easy. You appropriated at a prior town meeting 1.1 million. You will have spent basically all of that at town meeting, but that has a 43% reimbursement rate. So by the time when all is said and done, you'll be reimbursed 450,000 of that 1.1 million. Hasn't been submitted to MSBA yet, but regardless of your vote on the project, they signed a feasibility study agreement with you. They committed to reimbursing you 43% of that 1.1. That's still good. So you will have spent 1.1, but in the end, the true out-of-pocket cost of Situate by the end of the day are something 5.5 to 600,000. And then for the, what I will say is for the green portions of this, basically the MSBA changed their whole approach. It used to be you would get 2 incentive points if you had a LEED silver building, right? And they basically said, you know what, we're raising the bar. LEED silver is now a requirement. We've got to do that anyway for 0 points. Now they're saying if you want any incentive points, they've raised the number to 3 points if you comply with what's called the opt-in energy code. And by choosing this dual fuel system, that means that this building could be switched over to all electric someday. We're not going to open it that way, but it has the ability to be switched over to that. That gets us 3 points. And then there are some indoor air quality requirements that we're going to hit anyway, so we will get the 4th point. So 4 of those percentage points, when I say that 48.5% reimbursement rate, are based on the green features in the building. The state's really, you might have seen in the paper, they took some real hits about, you know, we're spending all this money and we're supposed to be a green state, we're not doing this. So now, you know, they used to allow cities and towns to submit for boilers. They're not even doing boilers anymore. They're saying have to be heat pumps. So they're really trying to come across with this. But so this building will be LEED silver at least. You know, and again, their team will always try to shoot for higher, and it will get us the 4 points. What we don't talk about tonight because it's really after the fact, is we haven't even talked about the money that's available from Eversource for rebates, which is not an insignificant 6-figure number, probably a couple $100,000 that we of course will pursue with the design team. But we really don't like talking about that in the project budgeting because it's an after the fact, it's years away. If we do it, Nancy will get it and you'll borrow less, you know, because of that.
Yeah, when the project originally went to the feasibility stage, the budget was something like $80 million, now it's $120 million. And so my question to you is, as you guys are going through this process, for the new building concept, did you consider any cost savings to try to, in the design, the new building design, to try to bring the cost down to something that was...
Sure, and we've seen some of the online comments about that 80-something million, right? And, you know, what we think happened with that is that 80-something million is a number that was, you know, when the first SOI was thought about way back, that was a valid number. At 5% a year, take 85 and go times 1.05, 5 times. Not even the numbers that actually happened. You're at the 120. At the end of the day, a 560 student school drives a program. The program drives the square footage. The square footage at the cost is kind of where we are. I think at the end of the day, the team is always trying to look at things that are make this a 60, 70 plus year building, right? Build it as strong materials and not be penny wise, pound foolish, right? You know, simple, you know, we already, when the cost came in high, went through a list of VE, as an example, the view on and vinyl, that was all supposed to be metal, and they said, no, we can save money by bringing the brick from the back of the building around the front and doing half of that. And we had probably 25 different items to try to, you know, drop the price. We also have some ideas for moving forward. You know, if we raise the grade just a little bit on portions of the site, that's less site work. That will save, you know, save us some money later. I think the important thing is that it's not just get to this point and stop. It's get to this point and, you know, try to always keep in mind that we have to stay within budget. As an example, though, when we talk about the energy code and the 4 points, all the windows in this building now are triple glazed. Okay, that's the most expensive window you could buy. But if you want the 4 points and you need to comply with the energy code because it's a requirement, your cost per square foot for glazing is like $200 and something a square foot. There are certain things that we have to do. I think the building is very, again, I'm the engineer here. I don't,
do a good job.
Yeah, it's very efficient from a grossing factor standpoint, right? When we talk about net square footage, that's kind of the program square. A classroom is 900 square feet. The MSBA allows us 1.5 times that square footage for hallways and stairs and the thickness of walls and all the things that make up the full building. And these guys stuck to it. They didn't go higher than the 1.5. And that's one of the things as an OPM that we look for to say, wait a minute, if there's wasted space, if there's hallways to nowhere, inefficiencies, that's square footage that you don't need. This is a very efficient and tight building. There's really no space that's not used. And we do have, you know, we have a list of things that I'm happy to share that, you know, kind of looked at to get to this, to get us to the budget where we are right now. I don't know if you have any kind of comments.
Just in terms of $80 million, which was, I think it was in the RFS too, the request for services. That was an estimated construction cost too, right? So the 1.26, which gets us to the project cost, the $124 million, that's really the full project cost. I don't think that was taken into consideration when that number was put out there. So the 85 million at that time times, say 1.3, gets us up over $100 million then anyway. So, and it didn't really take into consideration what the size of the building was. So all that's been done. That's why you go through the study process, right? It's put out there as this is what it might cost, but then you got to go through the entire process and see what it actually does cost.
How many square feet is the building?
We are at
107.
107.
5.
481 or something. Yeah. So under 108,000. The other thing is, this is a stake in the ground to submit to MSBA. We're going to continue to try to look for savings as we move forward.
107,840.
Thank you.
So we're going to continue to try to look for savings as we move forward. And we get into more detail. As we've also, this is schematic design. So while there's a fair amount of detail in there, and it's a 30, 40-page estimate that goes with it, we have a lot of detail to figure out. So we're going to try to find efficiency as we move forward also.
This really didn't have like another, you know, major ideas on to change the facade or to do something that could bring the cost down 10% or something like that. You really had kind of your plan, and you worked that plan and then came up with what you came up with.
Well, see, when you go through the design process, you get a cost estimate for PSR, first method. You get a cost estimate. You say, okay, here we are marching forward. But now, as we're in schematic design, we're developing more detail. We're talking more about the systems, more about the materials, more about the site. And as you're designing, you don't necessarily know how they're impacting the cost until you actually get the cost estimate, right? So we get the cost estimate, we see where we are, and your 25 line items are actually more like 50. So we went into the building and said, how can we change this design without affecting program? We didn't want to affect the program, affect the students, learning, teachers, change things in the community use of the building. So we went through and we selected a number of items. There are another number of other things that we're going to continue to look at moving forward. The amount of glazing, glazing on the exterior of the building. We're going to continue to look at it and maximize the amount of natural light coming into the building, maximize the views going out of the building, but not over designing the glazing that goes, because it's expensive, right? So that will all be taken into consideration. The other thing that came out of our last estimate was some of the site costs and the cost of dirt, right? Moving dirt around. We're looking at ways to maybe raise the Flannery Field a little bit to keep some of that dirt on the site and maybe putting some berms around the perimeter to ultimately save some of the trucking costs. So we're just not at that level of detail yet, but we're going to continue to do that as we move forward.
It's also flexibility, right? Because I understand your point, right? You could say right now, let's build a brick box. All brick. It's the cheapest thing you could do, or make it out of block. But then the people who are already calling it looking like a prison, it's going to look a heck of a lot more like a prison, right? Like there's that finding that balance of again, finish versus longevity versus something that people want to look at, right? And I think, and again, you don't do that at a premium because you have to find that right balance. I do think that we questioned when you're on the building systems, right? Glass is more expensive, but then this metal panel, is it more expensive than brick? Yeah, but is it way more expensive? No. But it's really the glass thing is we always look at glass to non-glass ratios. Where is that? Because it's 5 times the cost of glass to to brick. So we want to make sure that you're balancing the natural light to take care of your power bills from an operating standpoint later, but not so much that we have a crazy high construction.
And we actually tried to minimize the amount of metal panel. We put the metal panel on what is the most public face of the building, right, with the wood grain, so it kind of looks like wood. We're trying to be sensitive to the neighbors in the neighborhood, want this building to fit within the neighborhood. So all that's taken into consideration as we kind of judiciously put the metal panel on the building, and then the whole back side of the building is actually brick. So, yeah.
Along the same lines, there was a previous in the December meeting, and the superintendent had posted some given some information to the individuals that had asked about it. One of the things that came up was there's program costs that are built into this design, and I wanted to read it exactly, but they attributed, our district needs came out to have 30,000 more square feet than the actual MSBA guidelines for square footage. I can read exactly what was set up, but that was in essence the comment. So I wanted to know, like, what were those additional district needs? What are we paying for? What's that 30,000 square feet that's above the MSBA guideline that in part is attributing to these costs? And so what are we getting for that?
Yeah, quick question. We'll let Jason, as our educational facilities planner in our office, he went through all this process with us and led the education program with the district.
Yeah, so let me start that response by describing a little bit about how the MSBA tools work. Right, there's a document called the Space Summary Template that MSBA has developed. What you do is you type in your agreed upon enrollment, and it spits out a suggested list of spaces. This project deviates from those suggestions by roughly 30,000 square feet, as you mentioned. What's not in the MSBA guidelines when you type in that agreed upon enrollment is anything related to pre-K, right? There are assumptions around class size, right? The MSBA guidelines for how many students go in a classroom is higher than what the district hopes to put in classrooms here. So we have 3 more classrooms, just general classrooms, than the out-of-the-box MSBA guidelines. Then there are additional programs, things like ELL, right? English language learners. There are no line items in the MSBA template for that kind of program. They will reimburse for that, but it's not part of their out-of-the-box assumptions, right? One of the key places where we differ from the MSBA guidelines is in spaces associated with special education.
right? There's no MSBA guideline for things like occupational therapy, physical therapy, reading specialists, math specialists, adjustment counselors, and those things exist in many districts around the Commonwealth, and they exist here in Situate. So we're designing spaces to serve all of those needs, but they happen to deviate from the MSBA assumptions about what a 21st century school should need. So I'll finish this sort of explanation by saying this. There's a difference between deviations from the guidelines and what's ineligible from the guidelines. So we have very little square footage in this project that's ineligible. Most of the square footage in this project, even when it deviates from the guidelines, is eligible for reimbursement. Pre-K is a really good example of that. All of those special education spaces that I just mentioned are good examples of that. They will all be eligible, fully eligible for reimbursement, but they do differ from the standard MSBA guidelines.
But there's really no way for us in this process to consider a building design or anything that would say at the MSBA guideline.
Yes, of course you could consider that.
But I'm saying that what you've laid out here is really no feasible way to do it. We have to go yes or no based on what you.
That's correct.
Okay.
But had the community directed the design team to design that project exactly to the MSBA guidelines, it would not have met your educational needs on opening day. Right, so we have very carefully tuned the project to the specific needs here in Situate.
And while we all know Situate's special, it's not a lot different from a lot of other communities that we've worked in, right? So these special needs, classroom spaces and specialist spaces, typical across the board. We see, I don't know what the percentage generally is, Jason, special education versus.
Well, I guess I would characterize it this way. I think we've done 17 MSBA projects. In every one of those projects, the delta between what's proposed for the project and what the MSBA guidelines are hovers around 20% over the MSBA guidelines. And it's sort of the same strategy that the MSBA is using in all of their other cost calculations, right? They will contribute to furniture, fixtures, and equipment, but they don't expect that their contribution is going to fully meet the local need. Same thing with space, right? They have these assumptions around what space should be, but they don't expect that to fully meet your needs. And so that's exactly what we've done here is we've worked through the visioning, we've worked through meetings with all of the end users, with the administration, to define what the project should be educationally and spatially, and it just so happens to deviate from the MSBA guidelines.
I just want to follow up on the process to make sure that people know that originally we had 120 doesn't mean, okay, let's just go max it out. We actually had to come down under 120. Just keep in mind we didn't have the demolition of Cushing for 2.8, and we had to save there too. So there were many, many meetings between the OPM and the architect to get that square footage, that money down. So then we had I think the last two building committee meetings, we had the same kind of meetings. How can we make a great educational experience for our children and respect the cost to the taxpayers to make this a fair building at a fair cost? And I guess one of the great examples was originally that facade on the front was a lot more glass, it was a lot more beautiful metal. I mean, it was striking, but brick is cheap. They went a little bit more brick, a little less glass, shaved off a couple $100,000. So I just want folks to know that there were multiple meetings to shave this number down as best we could get it. And those couple additions are because we do have some special education programs that most districts have, that we're proud of, that are additional rooms. Those people that work in those positions like school psychologists, adjustment counselors, we're fortunate enough to have the elementary room. We need to make space for those types of things. So we did crunch that down as best we could too, and we found that it's reasonable, especially with the averages among other schools. So just want the community to know that we're still doing that, try to get this number down so that it's the least possible number we can get. And at the end of the day, we can proudly say that this is going to meet our educational needs and be great for our kids, but also it's reasonable. Right? We didn't gouge, we didn't go for fancy this and fancy that. We went for sound educational decisions, and we were all involved in that process.
Hi, I just have more of a design question. We just bought a house on Bittersweet, so we're right by the parking lot. I was wondering if there was gonna be like a landscaping plan or anything like that to keep our homes private.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, in addition to the landscape, we want to talk about stormwater, right? And you know, stormwater is a bit of an issue out here. There's some high groundwater, and there's some surface runoff that occurs. So we'll be doing a pretty robust stormwater management plan and system. A lot of it is underground. That basically is a place for water to gather and then slowly infiltrate back into the ground. So what we do on this site will not basically wash out into the neighbor's property. So that's important to talk about. The other thing is the landscape that you're asking about. So we will be working hard to try to create some buffers between the neighbor's property and the school, between trees and berms, perhaps some fence. We don't know yet, but we're carrying money to do that right now.
The other thing to keep in mind, the site is not flat, so when you see the parking lot close to the edge of the property, the parking lot's actually down probably 8 or 9 or 10 feet, depending on where you are. So you're not going to be looking from your backyard directly at the cars. You're going to be kind of looking over that. So yeah.
Just a quick to your point about all the water planning and this whole project specific to water. As an abutter, how can I be as involved in depth to understand that and also have influence and say over the landscaping that's going to take place around the property? Is also to ensure that the project that you're doing to maintain the water on site doesn't have future state repercussions of growing the wetlands that are around. So bottom line is, who do we need to talk to, when's the timing, and how do we get involved?
So the first step is you can come to any school building committee, which is public, right? That's a school building. These public meetings are like we're having here tonight. The other thing is, when there was actually an abutters meeting, well, you weren't?
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So I imagine there will be more of those, and I think sharing those thoughts, sorry, Bill, but through the superintendent.
I can take it. So we took the feedback from that meeting, and we met on it, and we're meeting again next week to go over and address all of those questions and concerns that were brought up. And then we're going to have, kind of like as this process goes, more develop, as we develop into the project, more educated answers for you, and more some designs, and then call for another meeting, plan a couple of weeks, go back and share that. A lot of it had to do with, I believe, drainage and barriers with trees in your backyard, looking at the brick
So
wall.
planting some
Remember that
good
question?
seeds in you.
So again, I wouldn't, we want to do this, even if you don't vote for it. We want you at least to be, all right, they shared everything with us, we were involved. And then if we can't put trees in your front yard, so you have to look at the back of the building, we need to be honest with you, say we can't do that. So those are the purpose of those specific with the butters meetings, but that's the process right now, so you can expect. And I got a mailing list, so we can include everybody that's around. And the whole public's welcome to those as well, we can make those public. We'll sit around and have some coffee, and then we'll have some more detailed diagrams on those specific questions that you have. And I think each week that we go along, we'll have more and more information. From those conversations, we'll get more questions likely. So that's, I think, we'll reach out to you, but also, because we know you can't make all of these meetings. But if you can, those public meetings are pretty good. We have them in the library. Folks come in, and it's, they have public comment, but they're also part of the conversation, and we answer the questions. So that's an opportunity as well.
So as you guys solidify the plan, you will be engaging directly.
100%.
I was going to say, it's not unusual to involve the abutters, especially as it relates to the landscaping and buffers, and trying to make the school be a good neighbor.
Also, too, what's been drawn right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're about to submit. The design's not going to progress. Again, still share the ideas and have the conversations, but absent an approved project, the design won't progress beyond where it is. Okay, so you're not missing anything, but I would expect with an approved project, that first meeting in May, have already fed the ideas to superintendent, that's game on for restarting, because right now, the project team, the consultants are all putting the final details into the SD that's been estimated, making sure the details are there, the things the MSBA wants to see are there as far as backup. But as far as those very good details. Again, we're only at 30% design. There's another 70% to go once you know, the town hopefully gives us the green light.
But I'll say this, site design definitely goes into high gear when the project restarts after, you know, there's a successful vote. That's right on the front burner, because the site design has to progress through your local permitting process, and it's actually a little bit ahead of the building in that way. So be looking at agendas for, you know, the school building committee meetings, and, you know, just kind of.
Don't go away in May.
That was one of the points I wanted to make, is that once this passes, it will continue to go to the permitting process, which will be your planning board as well.
Yes.
That'll evaluate it. That gives you another opportunity to share your input while they look at it from another perspective.
That's a great point. Like for lighting, drainage, outside lighting, all of those things that would come up at a planning board meeting, that will all have its.
And because of the wetlands, we will have conservation running too.
I just want to thank everyone. So much work that's been done on this, and so much thinking about what's going to benefit the kids in the town. I'll just say, like, as a Wampatuck mom, it was a little heartbreaking to just be like, oh well, we're not going to come in 5 years. But as I look at the PowerPoint, I'm seeing how, if this project moves forward, some of the capital funds that are ongoing might be able to go to things like, I have a kid with ADHD whose classroom is off the gym. That probably can't be addressed, but like, there's no AC, so they cycle through the library, which is like a quarter of this size. So I just want to keep out there that there are going to be other elementary kids in town that are going to be wanting to have a more modern building. And even if it's not in the plan to do a whole new building for them, that we just hope that the improvements will be more than just maintenance, like new floors, and really be things like air conditioning or things that will improve the quality of their experience in school, just like the Hatherly and Cushing children will have a wonderful experience in these schools if we're able to get that yes vote.
Thank you. Kind of like we talked about, not only the structure is going to be different, and that's understandable, but we are going to try to get all this money we're putting towards that already, is to try to get the same model here of education, right? So Wampatuck has classrooms around the gym too. So when we move some kids over, or if a preschool comes over, does that give us an opportunity at that point to move some classrooms, possibly get creative where we can reduce that? So I think that's the whole philosophy here, is if we get this done and use more of our capital, and we have a maintenance line in this that we use that takes care of everyday things at $250,000. And last year we spent $300,000 on it. I want people to know that. I didn't bring that up tonight. Many districts have that built in. Part of our responsibility, we talked about the capital, but the capital is all of you, as the town, as the capital committee, does a good job of regulating where that money goes. We wanted to take ownership in the day-to-day things. So we have a budget of $250,000 in counting, that when small things break, we fix them so they don't become big things. And in fact, I'll give you another example that Mr. Canalo gave at one of the meetings, at the school budget meeting the other night. We want to make things better. So in the sink example, if we have a sink in a couple of these at high school, okay, because that recently happened, we have 1 or 2 sinks go in science labs. We go and look at them and say, okay, well, these other 4 are going to go in another year. Let's proactively fix them all, instead of doing one at a time like that, or having to go to the town, which we had recently, and have all new sinks improved, and now it becomes a larger headache. So I want folks to know, and that's why I showed that, why I'm explaining to you, that is a core belief of ours, that every student, now we're talking elementary, gets the same educational experience, even though they might not have a pretty new school right now. We're going to do our best to model all those educational flexibility was the term here. We're learning from this process, because it's been very enlightening for professionals and architects, and working with our own teachers, to now already have ideas that we can spread out for the remaining 2 elementary schools. So thank you for bringing that up.
You mentioned that the estimated first-year cost to the taxpayer was $869. When's that first year?
Probably fiscal 28, so you'd see it on your August 2027 tax bill. Because the building won't open until fall of 2027, so we won't have final costs until about that time.
unrelated to this, though, is another big project in town. When do you know those numbers for what their first year and when that will hit?
The water treatment plant?
Yeah.
The water treatment plant is being financed through the Clean Water Trust, so we don't control borrowing. At the time, I think we estimated about, I can't remember now. It was a lower number because we were using over $5 million worth of ARPA funds to bring it down. Right now, we are in 2 different loans with the state. So the Route 3A work, which everyone has loved, sorry, that raw water line, that was a loan of $2.3 million through the state, which we haven't even gotten all the money for that yet. And we're just going through the process now for a $15 million loan towards the remaining 40-something out there. And then a third year will be the third or more loans from them. So it'll be piecemeal. So I don't expect just for you to see that like one big lump. We will see a small piece for the $2.3 million project coming on to the tax bills next year, it's estimated, but that would be quite small. Right now, as was discussed when the project was being proposed, it's a 30-year loan, and it's also level debt service, so it's similar to a mortgage. It's the same amount every year. We looked at that for this project, but that's not how the other projects in town that we controlled, the public safety complex, the senior center, the middle school, the library, other than the senior center, which was 20 years, the other 3 were 25 years, and it was the same level of paying down. And the reason we do that is it's probably about $10 million savings in interest costs, rather than going to one of these other types of models. But when you get to the state financing, they give you low interest loans, you take what you get. You go where you're told. So that's why the water treatment plant is a little bit different. You will start seeing it on the next next August tax bill, but it'll be a small amount. And that one, no pun intended, will trickle as we go over the years. But you're going to see it in there's documentation that's going to be going out that shows all of the town's debt exclusions and when they come off and all the different projects, and you'll see the water plan coming in all together, but just understand it'll probably be a little bit smooth.
So the big financing number for the water treatment plant, roughly, do you know when that will start?
Probably at least, I would say, 3 years out, because they've only allocated $15 million for us in the coming year, the loan we're working on, and that project will not open until 2026. And the state will not borrow funds long-term and then pass along the repayment to the town until you've expended the money. So the great thing about this type of financing for the state is that we don't pay any interest on the short term. It's only when they actually issue a bond that they make us start to repay. So come and visit me. You and I can have fun. I have chocolate in my office. We can talk debt all day.
I'm trying to get to this. There's going to be some number that's going to cost for the water treatment plant.
Oh, yeah.
Does somebody know that number?
Let me come back to your question, and I'll look it up on my computer.
Okay.
I don't want to go from my memory, because at this time at night, my memory's a little dodgy.
The reason I'm asking and bringing it in is because it's this number plus that number pretty soon, and that becomes an issue of how much can a taxpayer afford coming up the next 2-3 years.
And listen, I think we can all speak to that, right? It's the numbers are gross. They just are, right? But the only thing we can tell you for sure is that if you don't do it and you don't address the needs, you're going to be spending more to do it later. And that's listen, I'm a taxpayer too, not in Situate, but I get it. It's been a crazy last 3 years seeing what costs have done. And it's not just in this town, unfortunately, it's everywhere.
Got less dollars and cents, more aesthetic question. I've followed the project as it's developed along, and I'm a supporter. I like, what you renderings that you showed today from the exterior, I felt that the front building, when it's clad in metal, a little imposing. And as a piece of public architecture, and I'm a neighbor, you know, that would be one thing that I would want you guys to kind of consider and revisit as the project develops to see how the massing of that structure can become a little bit more palatable. And I'll use a derogatory term here, but it read to me as like a big box store. That one section of the building, which I don't think is the goal. It's, you know, we have a wonderful vantage point from the building. That's the entry to the school. I respect the idea of being judicial with budget, materials and whatnot, but I feel like that is the threshold of the project sitting down. And that's it. It's just a comment.
So on your schedule, you had $790 as an estimated cost, but when you had the schedule of MSBA average inflation rates year by year, that's 790 in the 2025 year.
Yep.
But this is coming in at over 1,100. So what's the difference?
Construction cost. Construction cost per square foot versus project cost. Okay, construction costs, we compare, that's a listing of the contracts that went to the contractor per square foot. Because total project costs, you know, those can vary a little bit based on size of school. Like you can get a number down to a cost per square foot for construction, but obviously the project costs are a little bit different when you know, are you the architect on a $500 million high school? That fee's kind of up there, right? So we typically in the industry do not do total project costs in a square foot basis because it can wildly skew the discussion about the pure construction. When you talk about construction, you can compare an apple to an orange a little bit in the next town over and get a good feel of, are we getting a fair deal? In fact, when we look at it in the office, we actually try to take site out of it as well, so that we truly are looking at the base, just construction cost for the building, forget about the site, because as I said earlier, every site is different. If you have a site that has ledge in it, that number is going to be a lot higher, and it's going to drive the number artificially high. And if you look at that 790, that's the average, right? If I looked at on the MSBA graph, the ones that were a little sooner in the year, those were below the 790. Us, Dedham, Stoughton, some of the other ones were all above the 790, but they all average, you know, they kind of all average out.
Just an update to the conversation that the handsome gentleman in the third row and I were having. The water treatment plant was estimated at $255 per year over a 30-year period. But just as an update on the water treatment plant, we have, the select board has allocated all of the Plymouth County as well as the Commonwealth ARPA funds to that. So right now that's $3.4 million from Plymouth County and $1.7 million from Commonwealth. Excuse me, $1.9 million from Commonwealth. And then we also, since town meeting, received a $125,000 budget earmark towards it. And the first loan, I talked about the $2.3 million. The state gave us loan forgiveness already. We haven't even started to pay back, of $473,000. So we keep trying to find ways to bring that project down. So just a little update. You bring me, I tell you fun numbers.
Just one comment about pre-K, to tag off to something the superintendent said. The only thing, there is one area where the MSBA won't participate in pre-K. It's in the FF&E and the technology for the kids, for the extra 100 kids. So basically in this budget, we were carrying $2,200 per student for FF&E, so times 100 is $220,000. We were carrying $1,200 per student for tech, so $120,000. So $340,000 of the cost of the pre-K piece of the building is not considered eligible by MSBA, but the space, the actual classroom space, the square footage, the grossing factor on the square footage, the fees that are portioned to us and to Doran Whittier, and the contingencies, all of those things are considered eligible within the MSBA's rules for that pre-K space.
Because I had a question about the pre-K. It might have been mentioned at the previous meeting, but the entire town pre-K is going to be at this new school?
Yes, and the number of pre-K classrooms, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but there are currently 3 sections in the special education space for pre-K. This project is going to have 4 sections of pre-K plus a special education space. So it does represent a modest increase in the capacity to have pre-K students in the building, again, to address the wait list issues that we have been made aware of. But yes, it will be serving district-wide for that age group.
Thank you.
So coming back to tax impact, Nancy did some really great work to put together a little packet that has some of the general information that we looked at tonight, and then some specific detail, like for example on the back there's a handy chart that gives a range of assessed values of property and what the expected estimated impact would be for those. So you can kind of gauge where you are on that scale. So there's a stack of those over there if you want to grab those on their way out. And then another nice graph that shows kind of the flow of debt in the town and how debt obligations are kind of rising and being retired over time. So good stuff.
And I did want to just mention again what Bill has also mentioned, that all this information is online. You can get to it from sit.org, which is the school's website, and also on the town's website. There is a big red banner that'll link you there as well.
Right here. And actually, it's easy. You go sit down, or just scroll down with it, and you'll see that graphic.
As long as there are no other questions, I just want to introduce myself briefly. Emily Murphy, and I am here with the friends of the new Cushing Hatherly School. If I haven't met you yet, I'd love to meet you. I'm one of the parents who would be a great liaison if you have questions or concerns or follow-up and want to be able to direct them to the district or the SBC. I'd love to meet you and, again, help you learn as we're learning about this project. So come find me, we have information here.
I just want to point out, first of all, thank you very much for your time. I know it's Wednesday night. All the same, but I know you're away from your family now, and this is very important. There'll be more. I did want to introduce Principal Sheen, if you don't know Principal Sheen, and Chris Cataldo's back there. They're going to be off to the side if you'd like a tour. They'll stick around and give you a tour and some of the pictures you've seen, and maybe answer some of the other questions you may have. All right, well, the rest of us will hang around too if anyone wants to stick out. Otherwise, have a great evening. Thank you all.